What if a killer was caught on camera, face hidden, body disguised, walking through a church with a hammer at 4 in the morning? And after nearly a decade, over 3,000 tips, assistance from the FBI, forensic podiatrists, and millions of people watching the footage online, nobody could figure out who it was. Not their name, not their gender, not even whether they limped because of an injury or because the gear was too heavy. What kind of person plans a murder so carefully that they erase every trace of themselves, except the one thing they could not erase, the way they walk? If you are new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We drop crime case videos every single night. Now, let us get into what happened inside the Creekside Church of Christ. Midlothian, in Texas, is the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked. A quiet suburb about 30 miles south of Dallas, surrounded by rolling farmland and new housing developments. The population in 2016 was around 18,000 people. There had not been a homicide in the area in years. The local police department was small. Their investigators were experienced with property crimes, domestic disputes, maybe the occasional drug case. They were not experienced with what they were about to see. Terry Leanne Strickland was born on August 9, 1970, in the small town of Graham, Texas. She went by Missy for most of her life, and almost everyone who met her used that name. She grew up in a modest household, made friends easily, and was remembered by people who knew her as someone who could make a stranger feel welcome within seconds. After graduating from high school in 1988, she went on to attend Tarleton State University, where she earned a Bachelor of Science degree. Missy met Brandon Bevers during a period when she was working in retail, and they married on June 20th, 1998. She went back to school and earned her teaching certificate, then landed a position working as a special education teaching assistant. It was the kind of work that suited her. She was patient, encouraging, and had a natural ability to connect with children who needed extra support. Together, Missy and Brandon built a family. Their first daughter, Hannah, was born in March 2001. Their second daughter, Allie, came in March 2003, and their third, Sarah, arrived in November 2007. At some point after becoming a mother, Missy decided to step away from teaching so she could focus on raising her girls. But she always talked about going back to work eventually, in some form. That form turned out to be fitness. As her daughters grew older and became more independent, Missy started focusing on her own health. What began as a personal journey to get in shape quickly became something much bigger. She discovered that she did not just enjoy working out, she enjoyed making other people believe they could do it too. She was the person in the group who would notice when someone was struggling and walk over to encourage them, not with empty motivational slogans, but with the kind of genuine warmth that made people actually believe her. Friends described her as a ray of light. One of her co-workers, Renee Rodden, later recalled that Missy was humble, generous with her time, and completely dedicated to helping people build better versions of themselves. Around 2014, Missy became a certified personal trainer and joined Camp Gladiator, a popular outdoor fitness program that runs group boot camp sessions across Texas. It was not just a job, it was a transformation. Missy became deeply passionate about helping people change their bodies and their self-image. She was the kind of instructor who showed up early, stayed late, and sent motivational messages to her students between sessions. The people who worked out with her did not just consider her a trainer, they considered her a friend. She held her Camp Gladiator sessions at the Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, only about a 20-minute drive from her family's home in nearby Red Oak. The classes were typically held in the church's parking lot. Missy would get there around 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning to set up equipment for the 5 o'clock a.m. session. She did this several days a week, rain or shine. She posted about her classes constantly on social media, sharing schedules, encouragement, and updates. It was part of how she built her community. It was also, as investigators would later realize, a public roadmap of exactly where she would be and when. On the evening of Sunday, April 17th, 2016, a thunderstorm rolled through North Texas. The forecast for the following morning was not much better. More rain was expected. Instead of canceling her Monday boot camp, Missy posted on Facebook that the class would be moved inside the church. She wrote something to the effect of, "If it is raining, we are still training." It was exactly what her students expected from her. That post was the last thing Missy Bevers ever shared publicly. At approximately 3:50 in the morning on Monday, April 18th, 2016, the motion-activated security cameras inside Creekside Church of Christ powered on. Something had triggered them. What the cameras captured would become one of the most analyzed, debated, and chilling pieces of surveillance footage in modern American crime history. A figure moved through the darkened hallways of the church. The person was dressed head to toe in what appeared to be police tactical gear. A black helmet covering most of the head, a vest with the word police printed across it, black gloves, and heavy boots or shin guards. In one hand, the figure carried what appeared to be a hammer or a similar tool. In the other, possibly a crowbar. The figure did not rush. There was no urgency in their movements. They walked slowly from room to room, opening doors, peering inside, and occasionally smashing glass panels in the doors with the tool. At one point, they used the hammer to pry open a locked door. At another moment, they appeared to steady themselves against a wall as they walked. They broke glass in an eastern storage area. They moved through the hallways with a deliberate, almost casual pace, like someone who had time to kill. And they did. But here is what made the footage truly unsettling. Nothing was stolen. The suspect did not rummage through desks or take valuables. They did not appear to be looking for money or electronics. They were not behaving like a burglar. They were behaving like someone who was waiting. The suspect's walk was immediately notable. Their right foot and leg appeared to turn outward with each step. They moved with a slow, slightly unsteady gait that some observers described as a limp. Others said it looked feminine. The Midlothian police would later describe it as distinctive, the kind of walk that someone who knew this person in real life would recognize. That walk was supposed to crack the case wide open. Instead, it became its most enduring mystery. At approximately 4:18 a.m., Missy Bevers arrived at the church. She parked her truck near the front entrance so she could easily unload her fitness equipment. She had no idea anyone was inside. Her licensed firearm, she owned a gun, was left in the vehicle. She was not afraid. She had done this hundreds of times. Missy entered the building. Separate surveillance footage, which has never been released to the public, reportedly shows her walking through the hallways before the encounter. The Midlothian police have never disclosed exactly where inside the church the two paths crossed. What is known is this. At some point between 4:18 and 5 a.m., Missy Bevers encountered the person in the tactical gear. There was a violent confrontation. Missy suffered multiple puncture wounds to her head and chest. The medical examiner later determined that the wounds were consistent with the tools the suspect had been carrying throughout the building. A hammer was found near her body, though police have never confirmed it was the murder weapon. Shortly after 5 a.m., Missy's students began arriving for the boot camp class. One of them walked into the church and found Missy on the floor, unresponsive, lying in a pool of blood. The student called 911 immediately, and when paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Missy Bevers, 45 years old, mother of 3, was pronounced dead. Drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from tonight. And if you have heard of this case before, tell us who you think did it, because after 9 years, nobody has been able to answer that question. The Midlothian Police Department had never handled anything like this. Within hours of the discovery, they called in reinforcements. The Texas Rangers, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation all became involved in the investigation. For a town that barely had homicides, the level of resources brought to bear was extraordinary. The first and most obvious piece of evidence was the surveillance footage from inside the church, and investigators had clear video of the suspected killer walking through the building for approximately 30 minutes before Missy arrived. The person's height was estimated at somewhere between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 7 inches based on measurements taken from the footage. The gear they wore obscured everything: face, hair, body type, even gender. All that remained was the walk. There was a problem, however. The cameras outside the church were not functioning on the morning of the murder. Only the interior cameras had recorded anything. That meant there was no footage of the suspect arriving at or leaving the building. No car, no license plate, no face at any point. Police initially referred to the suspect as male, but as analysts spent more time with the footage, doubt crept in. Like the way the person swung the hammer appeared weak, almost half-hearted. The sway of their hip suggested feminine movement. The assistant police chief, Kevin Johnson, eventually walked back the department's earlier position. He told the press that they were no longer confident the suspect was a man, but they could not confirm it was a woman either. A forensic podiatrist was consulted by the FBI to analyze the gait. The podiatrist concluded that the unusual walk was likely caused by the weight of the tactical gear and weapons, not by a pre-existing injury, and that gender could not be determined from the footage alone. That was a dead end. Meanwhile, investigators turned their attention to the people closest to Missy. As with any homicide, they started with the smallest circle first, the spouse. Brandon Bevers, Missy's husband, had been on an annual fishing trip in Mississippi on the morning of the murder. His alibi was confirmed. He was not in Texas when his wife was killed. When police interviewed him, Brandon said he could not think of anyone who would want to hurt Missy. He described their marriage in positive terms and appeared emotionally devastated. But as the investigation deepened, the picture became more complicated. Search warrants executed on Missy's cell phones and iPad revealed what police described as an ongoing financial and marital struggle. Messages between Missy and Brandon referenced extramarital affairs. Police also uncovered evidence that Missy had been engaged in communications on LinkedIn, the professional networking site, with at least one man since January 2016. Investigators described those messages as having turned flirtatious and familiar. The man was identified and interviewed by police. He admitted to an online friendship with Missy but was never named as a suspect. Then there was the message that came 3 days before the murder. Missy had shown a friend a private LinkedIn message she had received from a man she did not know. Both Missy and her friend agreed the message was, in their words, creepy and strange. Investigators believed the killer may have been in contact with Missy through LinkedIn before the murder. They also believed the suspect possessed a smartphone and may have used it to track Missy's public social media posts, which openly advertised her class schedule, locations, and routines. It was becoming clear to investigators that this was not a burglary gone wrong. Nothing had been taken from the church. Nothing had been taken from Missy. Her purse, iPad, and personal belongings were all still in her truck. Her wedding ring was still on her finger. Sources close to the investigation told local media that police now believed Missy had been targeted, and that the vandalism inside the church was staged to make the crime look like a break-in. The suspect had planned this. There is something deeply unsettling about the footage when you watch it with this understanding. The person in the church was not panicking. They were not ransacking the building looking for cash. They moved with an eerie calm, almost performative, opening doors, breaking glass, checking rooms one by one. Some analysts have suggested the vandalism was designed to create noise, to draw Missy deeper into the building when she arrived, but others believe the suspect was simply killing time, waiting in a building they had entered well before their target was expected to arrive. Either way, it was calculated. The tactical gear served a dual purpose. It concealed the killer's identity from the cameras they almost certainly knew were there, and it presented the appearance of a law enforcement officer, meaning that if anyone had spotted this person entering the church at that hour, they might not have questioned it. At a glance, the figure in the hallway looks like a legitimate SWAT officer. It was only on close inspection that the illusion fell apart. Attention quickly shifted to Missy's father-in-law, Randy Bevers. 4 days after the murder, on April 22nd, Randy walked into a dry cleaning business carrying a shirt soaked in blood. But the employee behind the counter was suspicious and called the police. When officers arrived, Randy explained that 2 of his dogs had gotten into a fight and he had carried the injured animal to a veterinarian, getting blood on his clothing in the process. His daughter, Christy, corroborated the story, but investigators noticed something else. Randy had a similar body type to the figure in the surveillance footage. He was stocky, on the shorter side, and he walked with a limp. The internet noticed it too. Within days of the footage going public, amateur sleuths began pulling up Randy's social media photos and comparing his posture, his gait, and his build to the figure in the church. Side-by-side comparisons went viral. However, Randy's alibi was also confirmed. He had been traveling in California with his wife at the time of the murder, and the forensic analysis on the shirt confirmed the blood was canine, not human. Randy Bevers was cleared, but the damage from the public speculation was already done. The Bevers family found themselves besieged by accusations from strangers online. Brandon's daughter, Hannah, later told Inside Edition that people messaged her on Facebook saying her father had killed her mother. She responded by saying that her father loved her mother and she knew that with certainty. In May 2016, a month after the killing, police released a separate piece of evidence: surveillance footage from SWFA Outdoors, a sporting goods store located near the church along US Route 287. The footage showed a vehicle, described as resembling a 2010 to 2012 Nissan Altima, or possibly an Infiniti G37, light in color, with what appeared to be an oval bumper sticker, entering the store's parking lot at approximately 2 a.m. on the morning of the murder. The driver's behavior was bizarre. They circled the parking lot slowly. The vehicle's headlights turned on and off at random. At one point, the driver parked briefly in a secluded area before pulling back onto the highway. Police asked the public to help identify the driver, emphasizing that the person was not necessarily a suspect, but that they wanted to speak with them to determine if they had any information. That driver has never been identified. As of 2025, police have not confirmed whether the vehicle is connected to Missy's murder. In late 2019, more than 3 years after the murder, detectives followed up on a tip that had been called into the department multiple times throughout the investigation. The tip concerned a man named Bobby Wayne Henry, a former tactical police officer from Lancaster, Texas. Henry was a compelling lead. He had been a police officer, which meant he had once been issued the exact kind of tactical gear the suspect was wearing. He admitted to investigators that he still owned his old riot gear, though he claimed it no longer fit him. He attended services at Creekside Church of Christ, the same church where Missy was killed. He worked Missy's funeral as a licensed security guard. He drove a dark-colored SUV similar to another vehicle investigators were examining, one that had reportedly been seen leaving the church parking lot around the time of the murder, and he walked with a limp. On paper, Henry looked like the answer. Police obtained a search warrant for his home. They found tactical gear and electronic devices. They also found child pornography. In June 2017, Henry was arrested on the pornography charges and gave a jailhouse interview to Dallas television station WFAA. He denied any knowledge of Missy Bevers or her murder, but there was a problem. Bobby Wayne Henry stood 6 feet 1 inch tall. The figure in the church surveillance footage was estimated at 5 feet 2 to 5 feet 7 inches. Henry was too tall. A forensic podiatrist was brought in to compare Henry's walk with the walk of the suspect in the video. The findings were inconclusive. Henry's alibi for the morning of the murder was eventually corroborated. He was ruled out as a person of interest in the homicide, while he was released from jail after 70 days. As of the last public reporting, he was never charged for the child pornography found in his home. As years passed without an arrest, the Missy Bevers case settled into the grim limbo that defines so many unsolved murders. The investigation never formally became a cold case. The Midlothian Police Department has consistently maintained it is an active investigation. A part-time investigator, a retired federal agent with expertise in internet-related investigative techniques, was brought on to work the case 20 hours per week. The department's investigative division discusses the case at weekly staff meetings. More than 3,000 tips have been received from around the world. But the fundamental problem remains. The killer wore enough gear to erase their identity from the footage. The exterior cameras were not working. No DNA match has been publicly reported. No weapon has been definitively confirmed. And the one piece of evidence that should have solved everything, the distinctive walk, has led nowhere. The theories persist. Some people believe Brandon orchestrated his wife's murder from out of state, hiring someone to carry it out while he established his alibi in Mississippi. The fact that both Brandon and his father happened to be out of state on the same morning has struck many observers as suspicious, though both alibis have been independently verified by law enforcement. Others believe a jealous spouse, perhaps the wife of one of the men Missy had been communicating with, carried out the killing in a rage. And this theory gained traction, partly because some analysts felt the suspect's gait and build appeared feminine, and partly because the nature of the attack, up close, personal, and violent, suggested emotional motivation rather than a cold professional hit. A hired killer would not have spent 30 minutes wandering a church with a hammer. Some point back to Randy, arguing that alibis can be fabricated and that the physical resemblance between him and the figure in the footage is too striking to dismiss. Others think the killer was a stranger, someone who fixated on Missy through her public social media presence and tracked her to the church. Missy's Camp Gladiator schedule, her locations, her routine. All of it was posted publicly on Facebook, as anyone with internet access could have known exactly where she would be at 4:30 on a Monday morning. One of the more disturbing details that police disclosed in a search warrant is the belief that the suspect possessed a smartphone and may have used it to stalk Missy's schedule. Even more alarming, investigators suggested in that same warrant that the suspect may have used the phone to record the murder itself. That claim has never been elaborated on publicly, and no recording has ever surfaced. Brandon Bevers eventually gave a small number of interviews. He told People magazine that he believed the killer was someone Missy knew, and that it was a woman. He told another outlet that he had initially resisted the idea that his wife had been targeted, but had since changed his mind. His daughter, Hannah, has publicly defended her father, expressing frustration at the relentless online accusations. The community has refused to let the case fade. Renee Rodden, a former co-worker of Missy's, co-founded a podcast called True Crime Broads, dedicated largely to keeping the case in public consciousness. Every year on the anniversary of the murder, a vigil is held at Kimmel Park in Midlothian. In 2023, a tree was planted in Missy's memory. In 2024, a candlelight vigil drew community members from across the area. In 2025, as the 10-year anniversary approached, Rodden and others set up awareness events at Heritage Park, directly across from City Hall, with signs and banners calling for justice. The reward for information leading to an arrest has grown over the years. It started at $10,000. Anonymous donors raised it to $50,000. In 2021, another anonymous donor pushed it to $150,000. That money sits unclaimed. Midlothian Police Chief Carl Smith has said publicly that solving this case remains one of his highest priorities. He has acknowledged the frustration. He has acknowledged the years. He has not acknowledged defeat. Someone, somewhere, recognizes that walk. Missy Bevers was killed doing what she loved, in a place she trusted, at an hour when most of the world was still asleep. She was 45 years old. She left behind 3 daughters who were 8, 13, and 15 at the time. She left behind students who arrived expecting a workout and walked into a crime scene. She left behind a husband who, regardless of whatever private troubles their marriage contained, he lost the mother of his children in the most violent and inexplicable way. And she left behind a community that had never experienced anything like this. A community that still gathers every April, every August on her birthday, to say her name out loud and to remind the world that this case is not closed. The figure in the church has been watched by millions of people. They have been slowed down, zoomed in on, analyzed frame by frame. They have been studied by forensic experts, debated by amateur detectives on Reddit and Facebook, examined by federal investigators with access to the most advanced tools available. They have been compared to dozens of individuals, family members, former officers, strangers, and they remain, after all this time, completely unknown. A phantom in a police vest, walking through hallways with a hammer, unhurried and deliberate, waiting for a woman who had no idea what was coming. There is a $150,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest. If you know something, you can contact Crime Stoppers of Ellis County at 9729-377297. You can call the Midlothian Police Department Criminal Investigation Division at 97277-57634. You can remain anonymous. Missy Bevers arrived that Monday morning to teach others strength. Somewhere out there, her killer is still walking free, and somewhere in that walk in the outward turn of a right foot, in the slow steadying against a hallway wall, is the answer that 9 years of investigation have not yet found. If you found this case fascinating, do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant,